Welcome back to Careers with Miss V. I'm so excited to bring three incredible guests. Today we're being spoiled, and we are going to be interviewing three young geniuses who have decided to take the road less traveled, went off to do gap years, and decided, why should we do it alone? We want to do it together with our colleagues. And here we are. We're going to be talking to them about some of the choices they made and some of the incredible aspirations that they're already achieving during their gap year. Welcome, Adam, Emir, and Kudus in no particular order. It's so great to have you with me today and talking to me about this incredible journey that you're all on. Before we get into Digest.ai, which is really why we're here, but before we jump into Digest.ai and what it's all about, I thought we could introduce you individually and talk a little bit about some of the choices that you were making not too long ago. You were all in sixth form just last year. And I want to know what you were thinking about academically and how you decided to go on that gap year. So again, in no particular order, let's start with Emir. Emir Yilmaz, welcome to Careers with Miss V. I'm so excited. I know that you had particular interests in science, but you were always terrified of coding. And that's really exciting because Digest.ai is all about coding, isn't it? Emir, what were your interests when you were in sixth form, and how did you decide that you were going to jump off the path that most of your peers would have gone on and take a gap year?
Yeah, throughout my entire high school life, I was interested in the sciences, particularly physics and chemistry. And I wasn't bad at biology either. But what I realized was when I went to sixth form and took economics, it was also much more like a science than I expected. And I went to DBS. Previously, I went to Repton with these guys. But at DBS, we didn't have economics at GCSE. So it was the first time I was introduced to a business-like subject in a scientific manner. So that really kind of left its imprint on me. And I decided to study economics at university. And so, yes, I was actually quite terrified of coding for the majority of my high school life. And I was actually in the same ICT class as Kudus. That was where we actually made like our initial friendship. And I think the way that the school system taught me coding was just uninteresting. But now that I've come into tech startup, although I'm actually not a technical founder myself. In fact, Kudus is the only technical founder on the Digest founding team. I began to explore a statistical language, which I can apply into economics. So it's a famous statistical language called R. So I've done a few short courses on that. And actually, it's been a much more invigorating experience as an introduction to coding than I would have ever had in school. So I think my perspective has changed, definitely.
Love that. That is really interesting. Kudus, you were interested in physics, economics, and computer science, but it wasn't just what you were doing in school. It was also what you were doing outside of school. Knowing that you were very academically driven, how did you decide to take this path less traveled?
I definitely think it was a path that I've always wanted to take. I mean, I started coding when I was about 8 years old. And my first app was out when I was 10. So I pretty much wanted to do this like my whole life. It wasn't, a decision I took last year or a decision I took the year before. It was a decision that I visualized taking, ever since I can remember. And coding has always sort of like come naturally to me. It's I learned how to code before I learned how to do algebra properly. I mean, I learned how to do algebra while I was learning how to code rather than doing it in traditional school. So it's just something that, felt natural to me. It was like learning another language, like, how would you learn English when you're young or Spanish? And it's just something I've enjoyed throughout my life. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, like, I wouldn't call myself specifically academically driven, but I do find that learning how to code and doing things outside school did definitely help me in school more than the other way around. So, yeah.
And how did you decide, you know what, I'm going to put a pause on my studies and I'm going to jump into a gap year?
Yeah, I mean, I made the decision towards the end of IB2. So like when towards the end of the school year, it was a tough decision at first, but once things started to get clearer and we raised our first investment and, I was trying to manage the team, hire coders from, places like Russia, Europe. It slowly started to come to me that, this is what I've always wanted to do. There was no point sort of going to university, putting a 3-year delay on what I've always wanted to do and what I'm doing currently. and then getting that 3 year head start on other people, and being able to do what I've always wanted to do as soon as I can. And my sort of opinion on it is, university. I'm not someone that's like anti-university or highly recommend not going and things like that. But my sort of perspective is, if you know what you want to do and you know how to get there, you might as well just go for it. In the position that we were in when we were in the middle of signing massive investor contracts, having conversations with people that most people would only dream of, including us. It sort of got to the point where a university was more of a roadblock rather than an enabler, which is what it's meant to be. So for me, towards the end of the beginning of last summer, I just decided that I think it was time to focus on it 100%, and rather than look back 5 years down the line and think, what if I took a break then, or what if I didn't go to university? I'd rather just do it, take the risks now, and realize what could have been, rather than have regrets.
Such a mature perspective. We're definitely going to come back to this conversation of gap year with you, Kudus, because I know there's more to the story. But I want to go over to Adam. Now, Adam, you enjoyed writing and debate, but at the same time, you were interested in analytical innovation, which you described as sciences, maths, and economics. How did you end up on the path less traveled and join Emir and Kudus on this journey?
Yeah, so I think unlike Kudus, my leap into entrepreneurship was quite late. It wasn't always something I considered or thought I was going to do. I think it's a culmination of things. I've always loved building, in an integrated manner. I think TEDx is one of my biggest examples of that. It was a platform of student expression, and then later I realized there's sort of synergy with that and academia with science, and I found that perfect sort of mix in entrepreneurship. Definitely through Kudus's help. When he came to us with the idea, that's when I first started, researching into it. And yeah, I thought it was a great mix, and it sort of, brings both sides that I always had before, and found myself sort of struggling to manage both, in, the sort of perfect streamlined way. So, yeah.
Listening to the three of you, I almost feel like I'm talking to young men who are at least in their late 20s. Let's put it into context for anybody watching this right now. How old are you guys? Kudus, how old are you?
I'm currently 18.
Emir?
I'm the oldest of the bunch at 19.
And how about you, Adam?
Yeah, I'm 18.
So 18 and 19 years old, and you're talking to me. I do interviews all the time, and I have interviewed people of all age groups. What I'm hearing from the three of you is a level of clarity that I don't hear very often, even in people who have been in careers for decades. How did you find this clarity? And I'm going to come to Kudus with this, because I know that it all started with a vision. And I know that the two team members that Kudus approached, both Adam and Emir, this was not just an idea that you wanted to participate in. I also think there was a little bit of feeling safe in doing it. And then, of course, convincing your parents that this would be a good idea. And that idea started with the vision. Kudus, tell us about how Digest.ai came to your sight of vision, and how did you think that this would play out for you? Because you managed to not only convince your parents, which probably were your biggest negotiating strategy techniques that you had to come out with, but then you also had to convince Adam and Emir and their parents. How did you do it?
Yeah, in terms of how it started, Digest was never meant to be a company. It was never meant to be, sort of what it is today. It was initially just, it started off as a solution to our problems that we were facing ourselves. I was a student. I wasn't the most hardworking student either. And my goal was to just make studying a process that was as easy as possible. It was something that was inefficient. I wasn't aligned with sort of, how the modern student studies. Attention spans at pretty much at an all-time low. And I always struggled with, coming to grasp with how educational materials were always presented to me. I never enjoyed sitting down at a textbook for hours. I never enjoyed, watching my teacher speak for an hour. It was just something that didn't align with what I wanted to do. And that's how Digest was initially born. Once I started telling other people about the idea, though, that's when I really saw the potential of what it could be rather than what it was. Other people sort of felt the same way I felt. I started to get validation from my peers. At the end of the day, it was something that, we were building for ourselves and weren't planning to sell at the time. It was just something that was a project. But once you start getting validation from the people around you, from the community that you're in, from the people that you're planning to sell to at the end of the day, it is a strong indicator of, that's something that you should be working on. And it wasn't my first app. And I was able to sort of tell the indicators of what would sort of, be a good platform and what would not be a good platform. And getting that indicator from your community when they're excited about it, when they're interested in using it, is usually a pretty strong sign. But yeah, after I started working on the app, started creating the algorithms, it was just a matter of, making it official, making it something that, could go to where I thought it could go. And throughout the whole process, yeah, I do agree. My parents were like definitely the biggest negotiators. Adam and Amir were definitely a lot easier to deal with than parents and investors and things like that. I feel like they sort of saw the potential in the idea quite early on, which is always important to have, whether it's in a company or if you're even working on like a painting, for example. It's always important to have people around you that believe in what you're working on and believe that they could take it the distance. But it's been an exciting ride, a lot of negotiations, but it's nothing that I've ever shied away from, and I feel like it's given me more experiences than I would have gotten otherwise.
Kudus, how did you decide that you wanted Adam and Amir on your team?
Yeah, I initially went out to ask a bunch of my friends, so people in my close friend group. Adam's been my really close friend. We were, in the head team together. Adam was head boy, I was the deputy head boy. So we spent, pretty much majority of our time together. And Amir, I knew him from year 9 as, somebody that was generally pretty smart and hardworking. And he had previously expressed interest to me in working on a tech startup himself. So I pretty much just opened it to all my friends. I had it on my Snapchat private story asking for people that were interested. And I spoke to a bunch of them, and I just found that Adam and Amir had the best compatibility out of everybody that I spoke to. Adam and Amir individually, they're pretty great people. But when they work together, they sort of fill each other's sort of missteps or each other's flaws in a way that's quite rare to find. Or for me, it was quite rare to find in any other group of people that were, trying to get the position. So that's sort of what inclined me to, work with Adam and Amir. And aside from that, they're both pretty much, some of the smartest people I know, at least in my circle. And, if you're talking numerically, they're probably some of the smartest people in the country, right? They got top grades throughout whole of high school. Even now when I'm working with them in a tech startup, they're able to learn pretty fast. They're able to do things pretty fast. So it was never a hard decision to make, to be honest. They both, when they wanted the position, they both have pretty clear plans, unique plans. They had a way of looking at things that other people our age wouldn't have looked at things. So yeah, it wasn't the hardest decision I had to make in the company for sure. And it's a decision I'm still quite happy with.
Fantastic. So many more questions I'm thinking, but I want to go over to Adam right now. Adam, you're one of the co-founders of Digest.ai. So Kudus approached you. He had this great idea. You already had a friendship. You were connected. How did you find the confidence? It's one thing to be great friends with someone. It's another thing to sit down with your parents and say, you remember that idea about going to university? Well, I just had a conversation with Kudus. I think I might want to change my mind. How did you come to, what was the process of decision-making for you?
I think my relationship with my parents has always been quite open. They haven't really pushed too much in terms of, what they'd like me to do. I've always, sort of said what I'd like to do, and most of the time they support that. I think with this, it was an opportunity. It's so rare to find, at least at our stage, an opportunity to really work, have a big direct impact on a tech startup. It's virtually unheard of, especially at this early stage. So I was convinced myself early on just from hearing Kudus. I will turn the favor from what he was saying about us. He's an exceptional founder, and I knew working with a team like that, it was bound for at least a promising chance of success, no matter how low the chances are in this space. As I did a bit of research myself, I explained. It's funny. I never thought I would beforehand. I was always so Southern University. The idea of a gap year, traditionally has sort of a bad connotation. I've completely flipped my views on that now. But yeah, as I did more research, I evaluated pros and cons. It was a risk worth taking. So yeah, it wasn't really too difficult a choice back then. So yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, Amir, let's go over to you. You heard from your friend Kudus. He had this great idea. You were friends. How did you say yes, and why did you say yes?
I mean, for me, the real kicker was that it just put me at such a head start in life. Like, even if I had chosen to go to a university like UCL, which I got an offer for, I would be speaking to people 4 levels below in an organization that I'm speaking to now, and that kind of empowerment just really drove me to say, hey, like no one gets this chance. I don't know anybody who has gotten this chance. Why would I let it? Why would I let it go to waste? I said, let me dedicate myself for a whole year to this project and see what I can do. I mean, like the opportunities that it has opened for us, the people that we speak to, is just unimaginable. I wouldn't believe it if you told me 2 years ago that I'd be speaking to some of the people that I've spoken to now. And I just can't see any way that going to university for a year would have made that any better.
So I'm going to put on the hat of a parent, and I'm going to play devil's advocate right now. And I'm sure what I'm about to ask you is not something you probably haven't heard about, and maybe was part of the negotiating when your parents said yes. Has the conversation of, okay, what are you going to do at the end of your year come up? And have you decided that, yes, I do? So Amir, we're going to start with you because you said you did have an offer from UCL. Are you now deciding at the end of this year that you will go down the traditional path and do this project as you're studying, or have you decided, no, not going to do it anymore? And then we'll go around the table.
I think for me, I am going to consider going to UCL, mainly because I've always wanted to study economics at university. I think even I've got a more personal experience. When I was writing my IPQ for school, I actually did it on economics, and a lot of the context, a lot of the text that I was reading was actually written by UCL professors, and just the sheer level of detail and insight that they were able to give through mathematics alone was so astounding to me, and it kind of stood out as something that I could attempt to learn by myself, but being guided by those kinds of individuals in that kind of context would actually be advantageous to me. And economics is a subject which I think is far more scientific than people tend to realize. Like, although yes, you do study businesses and you do study economies, there's a lot of underlying complex mathematical elements within the actual subject itself, which I think would be better learned under the guiding advice of those kinds of professionals. And I think that is one of the reasons I want to study at UCL.
So Amir, you're singing to the tune of my favorite song, and that's I choose university because it will help empower me, as opposed to the traditional, I have to go to university. Isn't that what everybody's doing? Kudus, how about you? I know that you were the first to negotiate, and you probably had this question asked to you. Do you put any more thought into returning down that traditional path, or have you decided that you want to keep going and then only consider university when and if it's appropriate?
Yeah, I mean, for the time being, I am not considering university. I did receive offers to UCL, King's, and a couple of universities in the US. But I think at the stage that we're at, I'm planning on not going to university in the fall for pretty much 100%. I just think it's the right time to sort of make that leap of faith. I'm pretty young, so I don't have like a family or a wife or kids to worry about. And this is probably the only phase in my life where I'll be able to spend 100% of my time, neglect everything else that's going on in my life to focus on this one company. And I'd rather do that now than be 30 years old and think, what if I did that? So for me, it's pretty much a no-brainer. I mean, my parents might want me to go to university, but they've still been pretty supportive of me. Even when I say I don't want to go to university, I do see like my dad, having the gears run in his brain, but a part of him doesn't, he doesn't specifically say no. And also we're at a position where, we have done things that most adults don't do. And to the, extent of it, most adults can't do what we've done so far. I mean, we've managed to raise money in a pretty short amount of time, push products in a pretty short amount of time, while still learning on the go without, a degree from Stanford, a degree from Harvard, manage situations that, people with MBAs would struggle to manage, geopolitical conflicts that we've had to manage within our team, situations like that have just given me so many experiences that I feel like if I had to give up all the experiences that I'm having now for a university degree and 3 years with the university experience, I just wouldn't feel comfortable with doing it. So yeah, I mean, personally, I think I'm 100% not going to university this fall. In terms of traditional education, I mean, will I be going to university later on? Maybe, maybe not. But I still feel like what I'm doing now is traditional education. It's just most people get it when they're 22, 23, rather when they're 18. I'm working in a company getting real-time experience. I'm talking to people. I have advisors, mentors who are helping me through the process. I'm, shortly going to be earning money as well. We're raising money. We're, pushing product. We're selling to consumers. These are all things that people learn at some point in their life if they're going to be in the tech industry or any industry that's consumer facing. I just have the opportunity to do it at a much younger age. And personally, I feel like it would be foolish to throw it away at this point in my life. I'd rather just do it now, see where I could take it. And even if, Digest for some reason fails, which is pretty unlikely, but let's say if it does for some reason fail, I will have gained and learned so many new things and met so many new people that for me to go on to the next thing wouldn't be a problem. In fact, Digest would serve more, advantages to doing my next thing than a university degree would. And obviously I do see the argument for the other side, from parents or from Amir who say they like studying. I completely do see the arguments, which is why I've never, forced Adam or Amir to make a decision if not going to university or going to university. I completely understand the other side of it, but I feel like with things like university that are, going to change your life quite dramatically, or, if you go to university at the wrong time, it's going to change your life dramatically. If you go to the right time, it's good for you. But for decisions like that, it's time where you look, to yourself rather than to other people. I mean, you always should listen to other people, but you should never, take it at face value. I think you should really spend some time making your own decision. And it's a decision that you have to be 100% comfortable with. For me, because I am 100% comfortable with my decision, I will have no problem, looking back at it 5 years, regardless of what happens. When you're not 100% comfortable with your decision, that's when, some of the regrets might creep in, some negative thoughts might creep in down the line. But when you're 100% comfortable, there's no way you can regret just being yourself. So that's what sort of my takeaway was, especially with the decision to take a gap year and now the decision to not go to university. It's sort of just looking inwards rather than outwards. You can always listen to your mentors, your advisors, your parents, but it's a decision that you at the end of the day will be most impacted by, and a decision that you have to be 100% comfortable with.
Amazing. Again, I can't believe you're 18. Fantastic. Kudus. Okay, Adam, we have Amir going in the fall and Kudus deciding not to. Where do you stand in terms of to go or not to go, and why?
Currently, I'm sort of in between. So yeah, I have to make a decision soon. I understand both sides. Of course, it's a great opportunity. So much to be learned, but there's always the argument for university experience and learning in that sense. So yeah, right now I'm just weighing up pros, cons, risk reward, obviously with parents, things like that. So yeah, that's where I am. I just need to make a decision soon. Yeah.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate again. And I love that we're talking about this. And what I most appreciate, Amir and Kudus, is that you dropped a couple of names of very well-known and universities that many young people aspire to go to. And I think that sometimes that the gap year tends to have the traditional sense of, I don't know, like if you don't know, go, have a gap year. But here you are right now, and we're looking at the three of you and listening to the maturity level, the incredible focus and clarity of not just Digest.ai, but also what you want. And the three of you are definitely in the driver's seat of your future career, and you're taking advantage of every opportunity that comes your way. So by talking about the gap year right now with the three of you, I feel like this journey is not just your journey. You're actually paving the way for young people who are considering a gap year, but trying to negotiate with their parents. And you're also showing the world that you don't need a degree to learn. You can learn by taking advantage of these opportunities. So I just want to acknowledge the three of you for that level of maturity and also teaching older people that the world tomorrow doesn't look like the world that it was when they were young people. And what I'm really hearing you say between the lines is that you are ready for whatever comes. And I think that if you can teach through learning what you've learned, I think a young person right now should be considering the great opportunities that they can take on that gap year. But I know there will be somebody watching this saying, how did they get funded for it? So did your parents fund you through a gap year, or did you have to raise some funds for yourselves as part of that negotiating? Amir, how did it go for you?
So really, it's actually a hybrid. So when I'm in Dubai and I think the same applies for Kudus and Adam, when we're in Dubai, we kind of live with our parents like we would at the end of our academic career in high school. But then certain things we did raise money for. So for example, when we have to go away for work, the company may sponsor us and provide us with accommodation and some meals, flights, that kind of thing. So it's a mix of both right now. And also, we're in a position where we don't want to drain our company's resources by taking a salary when we can actually benefit the company by just living as we did before. So to say that we completely sponsor ourselves is not true, but to say that the company completely sponsors us is not true either. It's a mix of both.
Fantastic. So that's great. Kudus, how about you? When you were sitting down and negotiating, did you have to negotiate the cost of a gap year, or was it more of a, you know what, I can do this, mom and dad, I can earn some money, I will show you that I can do this? What was that like for you?
The cost of the gap year never specifically came up because the discussion only came up after we'd already raised about $180,000 out of the initial 500,000. So the cost was never sort of the biggest issue. I think more so, I mean, the cost of the gap year is quite short term. It's what you're going to be spending over a year. But the decision itself could have sort of ramifications for, the next 10 years, the next 20 years, for the rest of my life, really. The things I've learned at a younger age than most people are going to be things that, I keep throughout my life. So the cost was never sort of an issue that came up or anything like that. I mean, it was sort of assumed that when there would be significant expenses like traveling, staying abroad, like we stayed in New York for 2 months and worked with a design company there, things like that. It was sort of assumed that, because it's a company expense and for work, it will be covered by the company. And those are the things we budgeted for when we were initially fundraising anyways. When I'm in Dubai, I'm pretty sure my parents don't mind getting me a meal here, a meal or two when I'm here. So it was never a negotiation of sort of the cost of it all. But I also think I'm pretty sure for all three of us, we're pretty grateful to have parents that are willing to support us and can support us through a gap year. Even if we didn't travel abroad and we were in Dubai and we didn't raise funding, if we had to ask our parents for money, which thankfully we never had to so far. But if we were in that position, we're quite thankful that we are in a position where our parents are able to support us. I definitely do see the argument for people whose parents aren't able to support them, and that's not a decision you can ever fault a parent for. I think our sort of mindset on it was we're going to be taking a gap year for our company, and we need to support ourselves. It's not we weren't taking a gap year for our parents. It wasn't none of us wanted to impress our parents by being part of a tech startup. It was things we were doing for ourselves. So at the end of the day, it made sense to pay for our own expenses when we did have extravagant expenses. But so for other students that are taking a gap year, their parents aren't able to support them, it's nothing you can ever fault a parent for. I think there's just more creative ways to get around that, try and earn your own money. We're sort of living in a world today where people our age can earn their own money at a young age, rather than having to depend on their parents past the age of 18. So that's sort of my view on it. But I'd say we're pretty thankful that we never had any tough conversations like that come up.
Oh my goodness, I'm loving this. Adam, I'm going to change direction and I'm going to zoom into Digest.ai. Tell us all about it. I remember the first time I heard you talking to me about it, it was a couple of months ago. You had me in the first minute. I was like, how is this an 18-year-old and how did they come up with this? So tell us all about Digest.ai. And I know that Kudus said it was a challenge that he was facing and wanted to find a solution for. So give us the trailer version. Introduce the world to Digest.ai.
Sure. Yeah. So as Kudus introduced, it started with the need to solve a problem that we as students all face, right? Wanting to make learning easy and as quick as possible. So the easiest thing that comes to mind with that is Reading. Reading is study content, ever growing complexity and volume. How do you make things shorter? How do you read only what you need to know? So Kudus developed a proprietary summarization algorithm. You can take a picture of text, the RAI will read it, scan it, and create a summary for you. Then that generated responses from our friends. We kept talking to users. We found out what students really wanted. How do we make learning actually really effective? And that's where we came across Flashcard Generation. So it takes advantage of, spaced repetition, active recall, all the things we hear about in school, but never really make advantage of, because who wants to sit down for 4 hours making physical flashcards? So we thought, how can we automate that with AI? So now what we have is an app where you can take a picture of your textbook, journal, newspaper, any block of text, and our AI will scan, read, and generate a set of flashcards for you in seconds. Obviously, we're working on more things down the line, but that's the base core concept as it is. We're still iterating upon that as we grow, learning from users. We've always been product centric and listening to our user from the start. So yeah, that's what we're trying to build, a product for students. And as 3 high school graduates, I think we have good insight as to what the student needs are. We don't want to be a faceless corporate entity. That's why the whole process, we've been trying to involve students as much as we can in our journey, which is something I do want to mention now. I feel like it is fitting. For any of you students out there listening to this now, if you'd like to be part of our journey, we want to build with you. So just if you could head over, this isn't supposed to be just a plug, but we do want to provide an opportunity. If you head over to our Instagram at Kado app, it's KADO.app. Send us a DM saying interested, or let's build, or something along those lines, and we'll figure out a way for you to get involved directly in the building process. If we can say we've as a community built something that serves us, I mean, I think that's something that's pretty fantastic.
Kudus, tell us about some of the people on the team. Who's joined forces with you aside from Adam and Amir?
Yeah, so we've got Adam and Amir, and we have an extended team full of engineers and designers. So we've got 2 designers in Ukraine, in the safe parts now. We have coders in Russia. We have our backend engineer based in Zambia. And we've got an advisory board, with people like Mark Cuban, who have invested in us, members of Dubai Angel Investors, who are also an investor in Digest, and just individuals who are sort of experienced in the tech industry. But the team is quite small. We're about five, six people right now, 5 full-time people, and we do have part-time talent coming in and out. But the team's growing by the day. As a team, we're quite comfortable where we are right now. I mean, things are going pretty smooth. We work quite well together. We're a fully remote team, so we don't, have a specific office space or anything like that. But we're still managed to, work pretty well together. And yeah, I mean, the team's fantastic. I have no complaints. Can't wish for a better team.
Fantastic. Amir, what's your favorite part of being part of this team as a co-founder?
Well, I really like complex systems, and although what we're trying to do may seem simple, I think there's a lot of ways to increase like the complexity when you look deeper and deeper. And I think trying to find a way to solve the problems that we face, that's the best part for me, honestly. Like working on the product and thinking about ways where we could fix this and fix that. Oh, that's not working too well. What can we do about that? Just ideating with my co-founders, even speaking to some technical people. That kind of thing is really what gets me going. I think that's my favorite part.
Wonderful. What's the age group or age category of your team, Adam?
Obviously, the founding team is us 3, so obviously high school students, but we have engineers who are, in their 20s, 30s, people, designers who are similar, adults. So I guess, yeah, it is an interesting dynamic, but Kudus has been great in managing that. And also we do have a student representation as well, as I mentioned, trying to onboard ambassadors, things like that. So we're still staying as young as possible, although we do work with adults.
Kudus, what's it like to manage somebody much older than you?
I think we're like on a don't ask, don't tell basis. So like nobody really talks about the age difference. But I mean, I think the team, sort of respects what we're working on and the sort of achievements we've had so far, the strides that we've made as a young team. I think everybody that we've onboarded and their sort of job interview questions, every time I tell them we're, 18 years old, they do get stunned a little bit. But at the end of the day, they sort of believe in the same mission that we're working towards, which is, making learning as simple as possible. I mean, we have engineers in Russia, in Africa, who, they know people who have no access to education. Our engineers in Ukraine right now, I mean, they have kids who are unable to go to school. So they sort of believe in the same mission that, we're sort of targeting to reach in the next 5-10 years, which is making learning as accessible and easy as possible. So at the end of the day, age is definitely a factor. I think it was a bigger factor a couple of years ago, but now we're sort of living in a world where the lines are sort of blurred on that. You could be 18 and have a 32-year-old working for you. And it's not as awkward. Plus, I think it helps that we're remote, so they don't really see us in person. I feel like it'd be a bit odd talking to someone that was like 6'4" or something. But over a laptop, it really doesn't make a huge difference. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to respect. The respect that we have between us three, the respect that our engineers have with me. It sort of just goes around to respect and just believing what we're working on, focusing on what's important rather than what's not important.
My goodness, I feel like we don't have enough time. I have so many questions, but I'm going to bring it to a wrap and maybe encourage the three of you to bring me into a part 2 at a future date. So coming to a wrap, I'm going to go around the table and just ask you for your top tip. We're going to limit it to the one top thing that this gap year has taught you, that Digest.ai has confirmed for you, and that your education during secondary school was an indicator that this would be the biggest learning experience, and what you want a young person watching this to really take and absorb. Something that you think, you know what, this is my biggest learning. And if I offer this one thing to you, I know that I've left you empowered. So we'll start with Amir.
I think my top tip would be that if you have an idea, explore it, because that's how an idea can turn into something life-changing. That's an example of Digest.ai. Kudus had an idea and he explored it. Even the way that me and Kudus connected and how he realized that I had kind of a knack for working at a tech startup was because I had an idea and I wanted to explore it with him. That's how we actually initially started speaking. And so that kind of message, I think that really carries a lot of power, because your ideas will never be anything if you don't explore them. I think that's the one key takeaway that I'd give away.
Wonderful. Adam, what's your key takeaway?
I was going to say something similar to Amir in that just start, but I'll choose a different one. I'd say probably the biggest thing is the fear of failure. I think a lot of students, school is a big safety net, and venturing out to try and do something, no matter what that be. It could be different to start, the startup space, but you'll be far better off having failed once. Whatever you start next, you'll have so many learnings to take from that. It's cliche but true. Learn by doing. I think Kudus and Amir will agree. We've learned so much by just being involved in the startup space, even in just a year, than I think we would have having studied a business course. So yeah, I'd say learn by doing, and don't fear failure. Obviously, that's within reason. Don't fail the same thing twice. Fail but learn, and there's nothing bad can come from that.
Wonderful. Kudus, Amir said, explore. Adam said, don't fear failure. What's your key takeaway?
Yeah, those are both very good things. Sort of similar to what I was going to say, but like I mentioned in the forum, I think it's really important to just figure out what you're good at, which is something that isn't encouraged in school or isn't encouraged in even people's personal lives. They're just usually going towards the mold and doing things like football or learning things like economics, and not willing to explore all of the other interests. I mean, from a lower level, aside from just like company wise, like failure or doing like exploring it, it's as a person, you just have to figure out what you're good at. Some people are good at certain things, some people aren't. I could never go and become study biology at university, never in a million years, but I'm able to do something that I'm good at. And I was fortunate enough to find out what I was good at a young age. But I think the most important thing is to figure out what you're good at, and then that's sort of it's personally fulfilling. And the second thing is just find a way to distribute it to the world, and that's sort of more professionally fulfilling, and you'll make a little bit of money. Just figure out a way to spread it to as many people as possible, and you will be successful. It could be a tech startup, it could be as simple as art. If you're able to paint something on a canvas and you're good at painting, you're able to sell that painting to 100,000 people. You're able to be successful. So I think it's really important to figure out what you're good at, and that sort of ties into what Adam and Amir are saying. The only way to figure out what you're good at is to, one, not be afraid of failing, and number two is just to do it. It's people just have a fear, especially it's more prevalent in the community in Dubai, just because it's you haven't seen a lot of people go out of their way, go out of the traditional route and do things non-traditionally. But just doing things has no harm, especially if you live in Dubai. You do have somewhat of a safety net. So just doing it has no sort of no sort of misstep that could happen. If you just do it, take the risk, even if it fails, if it doesn't pan out, you will have learned so much from it. I mean, I've done things like start, e-commerce businesses when I was selling like massage guns, and now I'm doing something completely different. You know, it's experiences that will just help you figure out who you are as a person, what you're good at. So just don't be afraid. I mean, there's really nothing to be afraid of as well, but a lot of people don't see that. So I think my biggest advice would be sort of a combination of what Adam and Amir have said, and a combination of what I've said, and just, you know, not be afraid and just going for it. There's very little risk, and the reward has infinite upside.
Amazing, amazing. I can go on forever, but I'm so conscious it has to come to a wrap for today. Thank you, the three of you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Amir. Thank you, Kudus, for being with me today. And thank you for bringing Digest.ai. And today we spoke with Adam Nasser, Kudus Pativada, and Amir Yilmaz, who are the founder and co-founders of Digest.ai. If you are a young person considering a gap year, according to the three incredible young people in front of me today, the sky is the limit. Get excited, explore, find your focus, and plan and have fun. Thank you for watching, and I will see you at my next Let's Talk Careers with Miss V.